Should I move a little closer?
You're good. Hi everyone, welcome to Project Sleep's first Facebook Live event. I'm Julie Flygare, the President and CEO of Project Sleep, and we have some special guests with us today, Dr. Emmanuel Mignot, Director of Stanford Center for Sleep Sciences and Medicine, and a special little guest under here, Watson!
Yes.
A chihuahua living with narcolepsy with cataplexy. And we are going to give people a few minutes to join the video because I know it takes people a few minutes to find us here. So as people are getting joined, I want to give Dr. Mignot and Watson a few presents that we brought for them. Dr. Mignot, this is for you.
Wait, intéressant ça.
In English, please.
Oh yeah, but when I talk to my dog, I always have to speak French, you know. That's. Qu'est-ce que t'en penses, toi? Oh yes.
Don't worry, Watson. There's gifts for you too.
Yes. Oh, wait, yeah. I know you wonder what it is, but.
It sounds like crinkling paper, like maybe a treat.
No, c'est pas pour toi, mon vieux. I'm sorry.
Ooh.
Make with sleep.
Make peace with sleep.
Make peace with sleep.
Yeah, that's our tagline of Project Sleep.
Okay, that sounds good.
Some tea to help you sleep. And for Watson, you have a whole gift bag in here.
I'm going to keep that here.
Thank you. Watson, let's see what you got.
Hey, what's on la la la?
Ooh, a treat.
I don't know his look. Biscuits. I think we will do a little demonstration later.
Yeah.
I just can't guarantee that Watson will have an attack because
that's okay.
He's,
that's okay. We can't always be on command with
exactly.
our cataplexy, right?
Oh.
He got you a new Narcolepsy Not Alone.
Oh, that's very cute. That's
because you know that you're not alone. That other people and dogs and beings have narcolepsy too.
I think he likes it.
Hi everyone. If you're just tuning in, we're just giving gifts to Dr. Mignot and Watson for a few minutes before we get started with the questions. Oh, and you got some new squeakin' beakers. I don't know if you can see these, but these are some beakers to help Dr. Mignot make some discoveries.
Oh.
Do some science here.
That sounds great. That's perfect. That's what I need.
So now Watson can help.
CS2. It's better than H2S. N2O is better than NO2.
Okay. Science. He's talking about science.
Okay.
And I got you some Nerf dog balls.
I don't know why, but I think Watson is going to like it.
Oh, good. And also a few scarves.
Look at this. Ooh. I think he's totally excited. But he's not a bold dog.
Oh, really? I didn't know. We just got you everything because I was so excited. This is my first time meeting a dog with narcolepsy and cataplexy. So I went a little crazy on the gifts, but...
Well, maybe you will like it. Ooh. I don't know.
Cool.
We'll test this when the time comes.
And then I made him a few Narcolepsy Not Alone scarves.
Oh, for him?
Yes, so he can look very cute. And
don't you think that the dog is getting a lot more gifts than the human?
Oh, wait, we have more gifts for the human. I also made you my world famous Rice Krispie treats. I know a lot of people will be jealous when they see this, but this is for your team, and it's energy to help you make good discoveries, right? We need Dr. Mignot and his team to have energy, so a little extra energy.
That sounds good. I'm going to try that very soon.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
Thank
You're
you
welcome.
so much.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our Facebook Live. We're getting started here.
He's getting really excited.
Ooh, some good gifts.
Il y a des choses. Oh oui, ça y est, you know, he's going to, yeah.
So Project Sleep is excited to launch our monthly Facebook Live series, and at the end of this broadcast, I'll be announcing where our next Facebook Live is going to be taking place in October, so stay tuned for that. And thanks again for joining us. If you just joined, I'm Julie Flygare, the President and CEO of Project Sleep. This is Dr. Emmanuel Mignot, the Director of, Stanford Center for Sleep Sciences and Medicine. And we have Watson with us. Should we bring, maybe he wants this up here?
Oh, I'm not sure. You want to bring him up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So little Watson. And so we're going to get started with your questions. Thank you guys for submitting so many great questions. We got over 100 questions. So we got a lot of questions. So we tried our best to see some themes and pick out ones. These are all submitted in advance. So we're not taking questions live today. We had people submit them in advance so we can go through and organize them. And so we are going to go ahead and start with questions now. So, Dr. Mignot, the first one I think is mostly for you. Are there any big exciting advancements that are coming in the field of medications and treatments, but also if you can talk about research advancements too? And we had Dorothy asking about this, and we also had Hunter. Both people in the US were asking about this.
Hi, Dorothy and Hunter. So, no, I think it's an exciting time for narcolepsy right now. We have a lot of things that are coming down the pipe. As probably some of you know, we already discovered now more than 10 years ago that the cause of type 1 narcolepsy was this lack of hypocretin orexin, which caused all the problem. And now the question is why people lack orexin hypocretin, and the second question is, can we replace it? So for the first question, there are a lot of progress is being made right now. It looks like narcolepsy is an autoimmune disease. We know that the immune system kind of attacks hypocretin cells, and it's triggered by the flu. And now I think both a group in Switzerland, as well as our research, is indicating that we are finding exactly what is being attacked that destroys the hypocretin cells. So it's not yet to the point where maybe we can make it a diagnostic test, but I think it's a first step. So what I'm hoping is the next few years there will be ways to take a blood sample and maybe diagnose narcolepsy.
Wow, really?
It's just a blood
in a
sample.
few years?
Yes, I think it's likely.
Wow.
In addition, there is also some research that we conducted that makes it possible that by doing just a sleep EEG without doing the nap test that now we use for diagnosing narcolepsy, we
you
could
mean
also
the nighttime portion?
Exactly. We could also diagnose narcolepsy, and we have a paper that was just accepted and is going to be published in Nature Communication very soon. So I think that's another big improvement. So in terms of diagnosis, I think the diagnosis of narcolepsy is going to be much easier. Probably we'll be able to
That's a very good thing.
Sleep studies during the night instead of maybe even at home. So you will need to go to lab and have all this nap test. In addition, there may be blood sample tests that would come in. So I think it will lead to a lot more people being diagnosed much faster.
Okay.
And then, of course, which I think is probably what people are most interested here, is treatment is also making a lot of progress. Not only right now, the existing treatments are becoming better and better. So we have Xyrem and sodium oxybate, which now there are new versions of sodium oxybate that are coming on the market that seems to work for longer so that people don't have to take them twice during the night.
So once nightly, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's
That's in
also
clinical trials?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
There's also the possibility of a form of Xyrem that will not have as much salt, sodium, for people with high blood pressure or problems with that, and that is also in clinical trials. There's also some drugs that act on histamine, which could also make a difference for some people with narcolepsy, because most of the stimulants that we use work on a different chemicals that's called dopamine or norepinephrine, like the antidepressants, and stimulants like amphetamines and methylphenidate and modafinil.
So for some people, because I know a lot of people actually that wrote in, they felt like the stimulants haven't really worked well for them. The histamine might be different. It might affect them differently.
Yes. So I think for some people it works completely differently.
Okay.
Because most of the stimulants, they work through dopamine. So they increase dopamine in the brain, and that makes them dopamine is important to stay awake. So by having more dopamine, you're more awake. There is also a little bit of another chemical called norepinephrine that also is involved in some of the treatment. But histamine has never been really explored. So now there is a new treatments where histamine is being increased, and I'm sure it will help some people with narcolepsy. But of course, the gold prize would be to replace the Hypocretin orexin,
Right.
since we know that the cause of at least type 1 narcolepsy is the lack of orexin hypocretin.
Yeah. We got a lot of people asking about
Yeah.
that.
And it looks like there's at least 3 different companies now, or 3 different groups that have drugs that can replace hypocretin and go into the brain. And
That's like really huge.
yes, that would be huge, because we know that in animal models, if you create a mouse with narcolepsy that doesn't have the hypocretin, so they have all the symptoms of narcolepsy, they collapse regularly, they go rapidly into REM sleep, they have all the problems that humans do, and if you give them this drug, it completely normalizes their symptoms.
Wow.
So in theory, that's what should make you whole, as you should have been.
Right, right.
So it would be an incredible treatment, because it's a bit like insulin for people with type 1 diabetes.
How long do you think before that is like actually going to be FDA approved? Because it has all those, all of these have to go through clinical trials. It's a long process. For something like the hypocretin agonist, how long are we looking?
So the big problem is not that much the process, it's the unpredictability of the process. Until you try a medication in humans, you never really know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Maybe the drug is going to produce seizures. Of course, the drug is tested in many animals to make sure they don't produce seizures, cancer, etc. But, humans are different from rats and mouse, so you can never predict 100%.
Yeah.
So you have 3 phases that are ongoing for medication to be approved.
Yeah.
So phase 1, where you basically take a few human volunteers. You have to be very courageous, and these people don't have narcolepsy normally, and you just give the drug and you make sure that people don't have very strange effects.
Right, right.
That has already been done, my understanding, for at least one medication that is an hypocretin agonist. That seems to be effective. Then after you try it in patients with narcolepsy to see if it reverses symptoms, and it seems that it's doing that as well. But then after you have to try in larger number of people, because of course if you have tried in 10 people, you don't know, maybe 1 out of 100 people have seizures or die, and of course it wouldn't be acceptable.
Right.
You can't really tell until you start to have large samples.
Yeah.
So that means that you have a phase 2 in hundreds of people, and then phase 3 in a very large number of people.
Right.
So usually it takes several years,
Right.
3 to 5 years. And of course, the drug can fail at any time during this process
Yeah.
due to side effect of like efficacy.
Right.
And often the first drugs are not the best,
Yeah.
because they don't have exactly the right half-life. I mean, imagine if we create an hypocretin derivative, but it works all day, all night.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be good, because we know you need to have a lot more during the day.
Yeah.
So
But-
it also have to have the good characteristics. But
Right.
we have 3 shot on gold
Okay.
from 3 different companies.
That's good.
And then, so that I think, and then each of these company, of course, they are trying one molecule,
Yeah.
but they have many other ones. They often have, they can modify a little bit the molecule. It's the first time it doesn't work.
Okay.
So
So I just want to jump in here though and talk a little bit about clinical trials, because I think this is really under talked about, because there haven't since I've been diagnosed 11 years ago, there wasn't a lot of drug development that was reaching the clinical trial stage. And so I just want to make a point here that this is a really important time for people that have narcolepsy and their loved ones to be asking about, learning about, educating themselves about what's out there, because to get these approved, you also need people that have narcolepsy to volunteer to participate.
yes.
Otherwise, because no drug can get approved without people participating in clinical trials. So I just want to make that point that, as much as not everyone's eligible for clinical trials, but if it's just important that we are active in this process. Like now we're there. Like there's starting to be more clinical trials, but that also takes people with narcolepsy volunteering.
Yes, in fact, I would like to extend on this a little more. First, people should never be disappointed if they're not selected for a clinical trial. Often for clinical trial, you try to have patients that are more clear, the easiest, You just try to have a very special population, because you don't, the drug company want to make sure there's no confounding factor. So maybe you have narcolepsy, but you may not be eligible for clinical trial. That doesn't mean you are less good narcoleptic, or you know, it's just because you have to start somewhere, and you just have to trust the companies, and they try to do their best to go through the process.
Yeah.
So that's one point. The second point is that indeed, a lot of these clinical trials are often demanding because you often have to stop all your medication first. And it's very likely that for this particular treatment, you know, since we already have quite active drug for narcolepsy, we're going to have to ask people to stop them for like you know, a month or 2 or 3 weeks before starting the new drug. So that's
very hard.
That's hard, but if nobody does it,
then we can't have new treatment.
We can have new treatment.
Yeah.
And in fact, right now, we are going to probably start a clinical trial where we're going to start to do this even in preparation of a trial of an agonist, where we're going to actually ask people to stop treatment for 2 or 3 weeks, just to see how their cataplexy comes back, to be able to design properly the trial with an hypocretin agonist. So
it's exciting.
It's exciting, but indeed, I think
take brave people.
It also takes brave people, and I have to say, you know, I think all the narcoleptics are super brave. Not only they're brave because
we are brave,
because the disease is something that people don't see, and they have to fight it every day. And you know, it's not like when you lack a leg or an arm, people say, "Oh my God!" But when you have narcolepsy, you look normal.
Yeah.
You just take your medication, you prep yourself, but you give your maximum all the time, and then after you just. So I think it's. I think patients with narcolepsy have always been volunteering and always very engaged. But I think it's going to take a little bit of work.
We just need to stay educated, though, ourselves.
But it could be a game changer.
Yeah. We did actually have another question, though. Someone, Carl, who's in California, he asked, I have narcolepsy without cataplexy. Any chance of some relief for people that have narcolepsy without cataplexy?
Yes. So that's, I would say, a big topic of discussion, the topic of narcolepsy without cataplexy. We know for sure that the cause of narcolepsy with cataplexy is this lack of hypocretin orexin. It's very well established, and pretty much everyone that has cataplexy has this lack of hypocretin orexin as the cause, and for sure they will benefit from the hypocretin agonist because that's what they lack. Now, the people without cataplexy, that's a much more complicated cause. Probably it's not just hypocretin. Some people have lack of hypocretin, but others may lack histamine, may lack dopamine, may have other problems. But that doesn't mean that they will not beneficiate from all these other treatments that are coming for type 1 narcolepsy.
Okay, that's
For example, you know, if you have a fever, you know, we still give you aspirin, even so, you know, aspirin is just treating the fever, and it may be due to many, many different causes. So, you know, you can still have a symptomatic treatment with an hypocretin agonist. It will probably still wake people up, even normal people. And I suspect that these hypocretin agonists are going to be very helpful for patients with narcolepsy without cataplexy or idiopathic hypersomnia.
Okay.
And
Well,
it's the
that's
same
really
for the one that I mentioned before, this histamine compound
Right.
also. The more drugs are available, they will all apply as well for narcolepsy without cataplexy and narcolepsy
Okay.
cataplexy. There is no reason to believe they won't work as well in both populations.
This is good, guys. There's hope. I think we should ask Watson a question. Can we get Watson up here?
Of course, he's
Yes.
taking a nap because, you know, I mean, he was thinking it was a little long to wait for this, you know. Et l'animal. So he went into his little, oh, des plus beaux des animaux. Oh, yes, yes, yes.
There's Watson. Okay, Watson. And Dr. Mignot, you'll have to translate, but this is a question for Watson.
Oh, je suis désolé, mon petit
This
bête.
is from Elizabeth in Indiana. She asks, Watson, do you have any close canine friends? And if so, what do they think of your narcolepsy?
Oh, yes, he has some friends, but, you know, it's, I think the friends that don't know narcolepsy sometimes, they don't realize when he's out, you know, what's going on. But usually dogs sense, you know, that something is wrong. So they stop playing, and they're a little surprised, they're baffled, but they don't really like continue to jump on him.
Oh, that's
So
good.
in general, it's like, I think dogs sense very well what's happening to other dogs.
When he's playing with other dogs, does that
yes.
causes cataplexy?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah, but often he doesn't really need to, he's okay. He's not, I don't think he's, the other thing that's important for dogs is sense of smell.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that the dog seems to like his smell as well as other dogs. So I think that's critical. So I think it doesn't change his social life that much.
Oh, that's good.
What is difficult for Watson, I think, is when we go in long walks with him, because he just, when it's like 1 hour, he just gets very tired and he can't stay awake. And then at some point he just has a lot of cataplexy, or he falls asleep and we have to carry him. And if he takes a little nap, it's very short nap, boom, he's good, but it's not always possible for him to take a nap if we're walking, for example. But what's nice is that I used to have another dog with narcolepsy that was much heavier, Bear.
Yes,
but this one, is like
pretty light, so
it's
you can
really,
carry him.
so you can carry him when so he sleeps in my arm, and then that's fine. Huh?
Well, I actually try to nap before I go for my exercise, so that's how I take my afternoon or early evening nap, and then I go for my walk run. Because I don't have anyone to carry me.
I know, I'm sorry. Maybe we could arrange that.
But I've been okay.
Yes.
One more question about Watson. Does he take any medication?
No, so I thought about it. I think he really wants to go in his own bed, but it's like...
But he's so cute. We want to try to keep him.
I know, we can keep him. Maybe he will stay here. No, I don't think that's a good idea.
Okay.
That won't work.
No, I know, but just to keep his interest. Wouldn't he be interested?
I think after that he's going to be completely obsessed about it.
Okay. That's okay.
I think we should give him maybe a bit later.
Okay, a little bit later you'll have a treat.
Yeah.
So he doesn't take any treatment?
No, he doesn't take any treatment because he can nap most of the time whenever he needs it. So it's kind of fine. And the cataplexy, yes, it does occur, but it's not. It's usually controllable if it's at home. It's, as I said, it's only the most problem is when he interacts or when he just walks or things like that.
Okay.
Otherwise, he's really
For
fine.
most dogs with narcolepsy, do they take treatment or not?
Some, when they're very, very severe, but I think he thinks there's too much light here. He wants to hide somewhere. Huh?
All right. Well,
I think what
there's one more question for Watson, so we'll just ask that one. Does Watson have a Twitter account?
I don't think so.
What? I think we should get Twitter.
Unfortunately.
I think we should get Watson on Instagram, personally.
Yeah, I'm sure he would like to have an Instagram.
Yeah, you get a big following.
I mean, in fact, we had a an account, a Facebook account for Bear, which was my other dog with narcolepsy, and he had more friends than me,
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. So I'm sure he would be a leader in the canine community.
Yeah.
But you see, he wants to go back to this.
That's all right. All right, we'll ask a few more research questions and advocacy.
I mean, if you were him, you prefer to go in your bed or be in front of the TV?
Yes.
I would be given the choice. I'm not sure.
So there's some questions about testing the hypocretin. A few people asked, is that helpful to test for hypocretin in one person? Quinn asked, why is testing for hypocretin not available in the United States?
So I think that's one of the area where, unfortunately, maybe the federal government fails kind of in helping people. We developed this test more than 10 years ago, and it's probably the best test for narcolepsy.
To test it for the spinal tab?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course, it's not, many people don't want to do it because it's a little more invasive than a sleep test. But for example, in Europe, they do it a lot more because a lumbar puncture is very common, and after all, it's a very definitive test, so it's really good. And for us, we just do it for patients where we have a doubt, there is a difficult decision and we may change the treatment, and that's helpful to us as much information. So I do it maybe in 5% of our patients with narcolepsy.
Yeah.
But it's still a research test, and I'm not, if I wanted to do it commercially and be reimbursed and so forth, I would have to be following all the regulation of California and actually that are nationwide, that are called CLIA, which means that I would have to dedicate a part of my lab, separate from my research, and have special technicians that do this, and an inspection, and that makes it so complicated that it will cost a lot, and it's just not something that I can afford to do.
But you used to do it through research, right?
Yes, so I used to do it through research because I could justify doing it as part of my research grants and so forth. And
what happened to that?
And unfortunately, I don't have any more grants from the government, so I have had no research funded on narcolepsy for the last 2 years. So it's not very good,
I don't know if you guys heard that. It's been a big issue. I don't know if you follow what Project Sleep's been trying to do and raise some attention about this, but this is really problematic from a societal point of view. You're one of our leaders, so we're trying to work on, through advocacy, to make sure that sleep conditions like narcolepsy are not missed, that go under the radar like this, because like the research funding, if there's no funding for your research from the federal government's one of the best sources of funding, and people need this research to continue. So
I think the problem is a little bit maybe even more general than for narcolepsy, is that right now the federal government has been decreasing its funding for research in general.
Decreasing? No, but it's increasing now.
It just increased, but for many, many years it has been decreasing, or it has been flat.
Right. But now it's increasing, and narcolepsy is not increasing.
But the problem too is that it's increasing only in some areas. So right now, because all our leaders are aging, they all want to put money in Alzheimer's. So even if you are
well, we're trying to work on it, so just follow some of our advocacy. We're trying to make sure that the narcolepsy research is not forgotten, along with other sleep conditions, like the circadian sleep conditions. Like, these need to be followed, and make sure that we're tracking how much funding is going into them, and that they're not being forgotten. So we'll do more on that, more to come on that. Let's ask another question here. There was for Julie and Dr. Mignot. What makes you most hopeful about where we're at right now with narcolepsy research and awareness?
Well, I think I already answered this question partially. I mean, what's sad is indeed there is no funding for narcolepsy at a time where it has never been as exciting. I think there's absolutely no doubt that now we are very close to being able to diagnose narcolepsy with a blood sample, understanding exactly what's happening with the flu that's triggering narcolepsy, replacing hypocretin, diagnosing it better. It's just exploding. But it's exploding without any help from the government. So basically it's being done actually mostly through gifts from patients with narcolepsy. And so I'm super hopeful, and I think eventually it will change once there is a couple of papers that are, often it's too late, the government invests when they're already, the discoveries have been made because they are a little bit behind the curve. But hopefully when there will be more discoveries, that the government will
well, I'm really hopeful right now about narcolepsy awareness, because I do think there has been more of a shift of people being willing to share their story and be public about this condition, and that just is really super important, I think. And also research shows that sharing your story is actually one of the most effective public education tools. So that's what makes me hopeful, like that there's more organizations, there's more individuals getting involved and taking action. So I do think that's a really good thing.
So I'm pretty sure that in 5 to 10 years, it will be completely different. So really the funding will change whether or not it's going to take 5 years or 10 years or 20 years.
So that could be quite important to help expedite a lot of this.
Yes, but right now there is a roadmap. I mean, it's not like we know what to do. We know what drug to develop. We know what direction the research needs to go to actually diagnose better narcolepsy patient, and we also know how to prevent narcolepsy, which is not something we have discussed. But I think there is some serious possibility that in the future we might be to prevent cases from ever developing narcolepsy. then we could maybe reduce the number of cases.
So we need some more federal funding, I think.
Yes.
Okay. I have a question that was for me. If you had the option, right, it's because it lends to what you just said. If you had the option right now to either cure your narcolepsy or to have never had it in the first place, would you choose either? It's a really interesting question. I thought a lot about previously, and I guess like it's a really hard thing to talk about, you know, because I'm not just sort of like narcolepsy has become such a part of my career, and I'm not just saying as a person with narcolepsy. I think it's also become sort of like my professional passion. So, but I guess my thing I would say is that adversity comes in many different forms. And I think we'd like to pretend like, oh, if I just get rid of narcolepsy, like then I don't have to have any adversity. And I wouldn't choose not to have adversity. I think having the adversity of narcolepsy has been huge for my growth as a person. And so even though it's never comfortable to go through any challenge, like sickness, you know, death of loved ones, you know, divorce, these major life things are never things we would like to choose, but I would not give back. I would never like to get rid of the experience of what I've learned from my narcolepsy experience.
So I think that's well said. I do agree that everyone would agree with the fact that often people grow in adversity. So when they have problems, when they have cancer or whatever they have, sometimes it makes them a better person.
Yeah.
It changes them. It makes things in perspective. And a lot of people live their life in oblivion of others, and I think it makes people more human.
Right.
So I think there is a good aspect to it, but I think at the same time, you probably don't want the experience to last your entire life, right? Probably if you can have the narcolepsy,
like some improvements,
and then you can get treated correctly,
yeah.
you may have at least some of the elements of the personal growth, but not have the disease for your entire life.
Yeah.
I think that will be a relatively good outcome.
Yeah.
Would agree.
Yeah, I think so. Yes. All right, we have so many questions, so let's keep going here. We got a few questions about aging and changes. So one person asked about, does the severity and symptoms change as patients get older, especially moving from adolescence to adulthood? And then someone else asked about any significant worsening or improvement in symptoms in seniors around age 70.
Yes, so yes, narcolepsy changes a lot during life. First, usually narcolepsy is much worse around the onset. So especially in children, when narcolepsy starts, it's very abrupt. And the more abrupt is the onset, so the more rapid is the progression from being normal to have narcolepsy, the more dramatic the symptoms are. So usually people gain a lot more weight, they have a lot more problem. Yeah. It's very dramatic. And then I think things get, other things in your body, probably also chemical takes over to try to compensate, and you get less severely affected. So I think even in a young child, if you were to do nothing, often they would gain an enormous amount of weight, have very bad cataplexy, sleep a lot, and then if you were not treating them, most likely I would predict that they would get better, and then still have cataplexy and don't sleep as well at night, but not be as bad as they were before. The problem is often what happens is when you do that, you just wreck the life of people, and sometimes it wrecks it so much that they don't even have the possibility of getting back. Once you gain 50 pounds, or 100 pounds, sometimes, that's pretty extreme, but some people really gain an enormous amount of weight when they're young children. Maybe, you just never recover,
Yeah.
I mean, even so the disease may get better, you are in a place that's so far away down the corridor that you just can't crawl back.
Yeah. So that seems like that has to do with the disease onset. So,
yes.
But that seems more about like whenever you got it. So can you make any generalities about going from adolescent to,
But in general, I think it improves. So I think if you don't get destabilized to the point that you have major complication, and sometimes you just, like, especially in kids, you may come out of the radar screen. Sometimes you develop mental disorders. There's all kind of other problems. You stop your schooling, you know,
Right, but
etc.
as far as the actual symptoms.
But the symptoms, I think, would usually get better. So if people manage to get out of this, I think in general, you know, the symptoms get a little bit better.
Or we get
with
better
time.
at coping with them?
Yes, that's what I mean. I mean,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I mean. I mean, I'm
Okay.
just observing the totality of
Yeah,
the person.
yeah.
Whether or not it's a change of life, whether it's a change of psychology, whether it's a change of the chemistry. For me, all these things are the same thing.
Right.
There are some coping mechanisms that makes it better. And usually with, I mean, maybe also some people say, with age we become less emotional, you know, like for cataplexy. You know, I mean, unfortunately, it's not like, I don't have as much like the dying of laughing that I had when I was a young kid. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was a young kid, I could like just kind of not stop laughing. I haven't had that for a very long time,
Okay.
unfortunately. So
Have
there are
fun
some.
ways for Dr. Mignot to laugh. Oh my God. Find some humor for this man.
No. I can laugh actually, but I think.
What about for seniors?
So I think for seniors, there's several things that happen. One is it gets better in some ways because they can sleep whenever they want.
If they're retired.
So exactly.
Okay.
But on the other hand, it also destroys their schedule. So it's good and bad
Okay.
because the risk is then they just start to sleep anytime, and then they don't have a schedule and can really impair their social life.
Okay. So that's about their own management though. But
Exactly.
the actual symptoms don't necessarily. I've heard people say that retirement was better. I've heard that their symptoms got worse as they got older. So it probably also varies person to person.
Oh, of course.
Right? So
All what I said here is, of course, completely valuable from one person to the next. I mean, you just can't generalize this. A person is so complicated. I always explain that narcolepsy occurs in one specific person. And in fact, the treatments, the drugs are not sufficient to really take care of patients. You really need to see exactly what they're doing in their life, what they like, what they don't like, what they're afraid of. Is
Yeah.
weight more an issue? Is exercise? I mean,
Right.
it's just a disease that you have to take a very holistic approach, not just like give them medication and close your eyes. Otherwise, you're absolutely sure to fail.
okay. Yes.
And I think
Treating
you
patient
would
by
agree with
patient.
me.
Yes, of course I would.
Yeah.
We have just a shout out from New Zealand. So Rhonda wanted to say hi.
Oh, hi.
You remember Rhonda? She's at
Yes.
the conference in Australia. So she's saying hi from New Zealand. So
Oh, that's
you say hi
nice.
back.
It's late in New Zealand.
Let's see if she's watching. Thank you guys again for tuning
no,
in.
it's early in New Zealand. Yes.
It's early. Okay, we're doing our Facebook Live with Dr. Mignot and Watson, who's taking a little nap right now. And so let's see, we have some more questions. People asked, can you discuss any research or success you've had with modifying diet as part of treatment for narcolepsy, specifically if a keto diet is recommended? This is Mary asking.
So the area of diet is really just not studied enough to give any recommendation. We know that diet is extremely important. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about for regulating sleep and energy. You know, everyone will tell you that if they, for example, eat less,
Yeah.
generally you're more awake. When you're kind of starving yourself a little bit, you're more awake. And if you have a big meal, you're sleepy. And in fact, nobody knows if it's even the composition of the meal or if it's just stretching your stomach that sends some specific,
Wow.
nerve impulse to your brain, or if it's the content itself. Probably it's a mix of all these things. When you eat something, it's like eating a drug multiplied by hundreds of different chemicals. So you can imagine these things go into the brain, they act in many different areas. And then now it's very exciting because there's this notion of microbiome that a lot of people study, where the bacteria inside your guts are different in different people, and the way you metabolize the food is different depending on your microbiome. And that probably creates different kind of metabolites or chemical compounds derived from the food that go into your circulation and go in your brain. Many of them probably have no effect, but some of them I'm sure have many effects that we just don't know anything about.
Yeah.
So the consequence of that is that the effect of food on anything is probably very individual, because it depends on your microbiome and many other things, and that's, then it's very difficult to prove anything, because if you take 10 people and you switch them from carbohydrate to carrots, some people may stand carrots, other carbohydrates. It depends on so many things. It's going to be very difficult to to find a consistent effect.
Right, to show like effectiveness
Exactly.
and like the way that we, okay.
So that's why I think we just don't have the numbers yet.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we'll be able, when you start, in fact, there are some studies of people who are starting to study the microbiome, and at the same time, we have actually a study where I've asked some questions about the type of food that produce sleepiness in different people, and we're going to try to study the microbiome.
Wow.
And
That's cool, I didn't know.
Yeah. Yes.
Awesome.
But so what I do for this is usually I just listen to my patients. That's sometimes you can learn from your patients. You know, it's
sometimes.
not. No, but there are a lot of doctors that
Yeah.
believe that if it's not proven, it doesn't exist.
Right.
And that's wrong. There are a lot of things that you can't prove because you just don't have the statistical power, the sample to actually prove it.
Right.
And that's actually a big danger also of even the pharmaceutical industry and all this when they try to make everyone have the same treatment.
Right.
Because just people are different, and sometimes there are differences that are small, but it will take enormous sample to really
Prove that.
and you
Yeah.
can't prove it, but it may be true.
Right.
So consequently, I listen, and I listen to what kind of food makes people more sleepy, what kind of diet, and I'm very open to people trying different things. But I'm absolutely certain that for ketogenic diet, for example, may work for some people and it will not work for some others.
Okay. Very cool.
I can absolutely guarantee it.
Okay. All right.
And I want to point out that it's very unlikely that it will completely reverse. It's not like the hypocretin cells will go back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the hypocretin cells are still going to be missing. It's not because you take a ketogenic diet that the hypocretin cells are going to suddenly reappear in your brain. There's no way. That's just not going to happen. So it may mitigate quite a bit the symptoms, but probably it's not going to completely cure the disease.
Mm-hmm. This is completely different, but Kyla is asking, I have narcolepsy with cataplexy. How high are the chances that my kids will also have narcolepsy with cataplexy?
Hi, Kyla. So that has been quite well studied, actually. So the risk is about 1% per child or for direct family member, like what we call first-degree relatives, so either your parents or your children or your brother or sister that share 50% of your genetics have about a 1% chance. So if you have narcolepsy with cataplexy, 1% chance that your child will have narcolepsy. So in general, I say you shouldn't worry too much unless you have 100 children and you have to start very early. But statistically, it's definitely more often than in the random population. It's about 40 times more common than in the random population.
Yeah.
So I think you have to watch a little bit, but you shouldn't be worried. There's many other problems that have 1% chance. So if you start to worry about everything that has 1% chance, you will spend your time worrying.
Right.
So I think you just watch, and in general it doesn't happen, but sometimes, I mean,
Well, there's definitely families that
Oh, yeah,
have narcolepsy at multiple levels.
I mean, I have one of my patients, of course I won't mention the name, but she's a very nice patient, an adolescent girl, and she started narcolepsy, etc. And the father told me, oh, I think my second daughter is starting narcolepsy, she's starting to have all this. So I said, well, it's quite unlikely, it's rare, etc. But then finally, yeah,
Wow.
it happened. So it does happen, of course, and
Yeah.
they're very nice people. But it's both of them have narcolepsy, and it's definitely possible.
Yeah. So here's one from Matthew in the United States. He asks, I would like to contribute more as a patient advocate and get involved in conversations with researchers in the sleep medicine community, but I have very limited resources, so attending conferences is not realistic. How do I get and stay connected in spite of my financial limitations? So thank you, Matthew, for wanting to be more of a patient advocate. From my perspective, I think there's a lot you can do from home. And especially, like we were just talking about the fact that the federal government will hopefully, we need to have more research funding. There's so much you can do from home to make that happen. So we've done petitions and letter signing efforts where you just call and email to your representatives, and that's something you can do from home. It doesn't cost any money, and just being a voice for sleepiness and for sleep and for narcolepsy is so important, because if we're not talking about it, it won't be on anyone's minds. So there's a lot you can do from home for advocacy, and that would be what I would suggest is a great way to get involved.
I can add one thing too, is there are certain programs also where you can pair one narcoleptic patient with another. I think we doctors are wonderful. Some doctors. No, but I also think that part of the very important thing, at least for me, as a doctor, is to understand that you don't always have enough time. I wish we will have enough time, and also you just can't do everything.
Right, of
and
course.
I think learning from other patients,
right.
There's a lot of things we don't have to cover.
Yes.
Time to cover that patients can help each other.
Of course.
So being part of the community.
Yes.
Like listening to this podcast.
Yes.
Like
yes.
communicating with you.
Yeah.
Like I think there's even some programs where you can pair one narcoleptic. We have sometimes new narcoleptic patients, and they can be in contact with someone that already has established narcolepsy.
Well, there's not that specific program as far as I know in the U.S.,
Okay.
but there's Narcolepsy Network is a wonderful organization. There's Wake Up Narcolepsy. There's the Hypersomnia Foundation and Project Sleep, all in the U.S. So these are really great different nonprofits that have different programs. For us, we don't have that specific of a peer-to-peer support program, but social support is so important. There's Facebook groups, and there's lots of different online connections, but also going to I guess if you can't go to conferences, then to do it from home. There's different ways to get involved, and we should have more programs and support services as well. If we had more resources as organizations as well, we could be doing more there too. There's lots more we could be doing. But,
no, there's a lot, and we mentioned the clinical trials, the research. I mean, of course, if there is some funding, there's definitely a lot that can be done to help. Being part of a community, I think, is very important.
Definitely. We have about 15 more minutes. Should we try to get Watson back up here?
Of course.
And chat with him a little bit more?
I know, he seems to be not very interested in this story.
He's not interested in our Facebook Live? I don't understand.
I know, I understand.
Aww.
Comment ça se fait la bête?
Can I give him a treat?
Did you hear? He said, that means he's really happy.
Can I try giving him a treat?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
What about a little bit, but I have my own treats.
You have a special treat? Okay.
I kind of suggest that we try my own because...
Okay. Oh, that seems interesting.
Yes.
Ooh.
Oh no, that's a chicken stick, I think. We'll first start with chicken.
Ooh.
Is that right?
That looks good.
Oh no, sometimes this works. I mean, I hope there are some children watching this program.
Yes.
And if there are some children, I hope you eat your greens, like Watson, because Watson loves...
Is this radish?
Yes. He likes
loves radish? That's so healthy.
We'll try. Problem is I like radish even more, so I'm wondering if I shouldn't take it. But, tu le veux? Hop. Il va se cacher, I don't know. Maybe up. I think has a little bit of weakness in there. Well, I don't know if he really wants radish. Up?
No,
no,
he's
okay.
not really interested in radish. I'm not surprised.
Not today. I think it's
healthy.
because he's a little. No, it's because he's a bit tense. It's not every day that you're on TV.
I know.
I think it probably. So we'll try some chicken.
Ooh.
Doucement. But I'm going
so
to
is that usually his biggest trigger? Is
food? Yes, is pretty effective, but it really depends. He has the difficulty is it's exactly like in patients. Patients don't have cataplexy when they are in a tense situation, an unusual situation. Right. What works the best for Watson is when he's like relaxed. He knows,
I was on a Japanese television show, and there was some miscommunication in advance, and so they thought that they could show up and I would be able to have cataplexy on command. And they even I said I got gummy bears once, so they tried to buy me gummy bears, thinking if they handed me gummy bears, I would have cataplexy. And I was like, it's not exactly, it's all situational.
Is there something to clean my hands? Yeah, that's exactly it. So okay. So it's unpredictable.
That's all right. We don't need it. It's not a party trick. We don't have to pull out our cataplexy on demand.
No, but we can try still. But you have to go up. Allez, hop, hop. Oh,
It's just so nice
hop.
to meet
Allez, allez, tu peux y
another
arriver.
being that has narcolepsy,
Allez.
cataplexy.
Viens, viens. Oh, si on te le mettait dans ta petite narcolepsy not alone.
Yes.
What about that?
Dog bowl. What do you
Let's
think?
try. Who knows? Maybe it will work. Oh, oui. You see, there is some focus going on here.
Ah.
Doucement. Doucement, Watson.
I think he likes his new Narcolepsy Not Alone dog bowl. That's pretty cute.
I don't know if he likes the inside or... Is
Oh,
that it?
food.
That's it?
Oh,
Oh, mais t'es nul. C'est pas possible.
that's okay. He doesn't have to have cataplexy.
Ah,
Oh.
okay, look. I think he had a little bit of an attack. You know, he went back and he stumbled a little bit, but that was a little...
That's kind of how a lot of us. So the people asked about partial cataplexy.
Yeah.
They asked about tongue. We got a few questions about tongue protrusions and I think in
Yes.
children, and about partial. I mean, that's a big part of cataplexy is partial. I know
Yes.
for me, I have cataplexy every single day, but a lot of people don't. You know, sometimes it's just a sensation in my head, and sometimes it crosses over into my muscles in a tiny little way. Oh.
You see, he has to sit down.
Yeah, I feel like his eyes were.
I don't know. I think it's a bit hard to show. Poor Ben. He likes it, but usually we play with him, so the problem is you can't follow, but I think if I throw it out and I just get
Oh,
him
yeah.
to, he will probably have an attack, but
Aw.
I think it's, you won't be able to see it. Huh?
Oh, Dr. Mignot, I
Okay.
had a question for you. This is my question, was how are we going to know if another flu strand is going to cause any problem with narcolepsy? You know, every
Oh.
year there's sort of like a new flu, there's a new vaccine. Like, how do we know if that's an issue? And should people with narcolepsy get flu shots?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. So as you probably know, that we are now discovering that narcolepsy is triggered by the flu. It's just pretty sure now, and especially the 2009, the swine flu that started in 2009 seems to have been a very bad, type of flu to trigger narcolepsy. And we are starting to figure out exactly which piece of the flu is involved in triggering narcolepsy and why the 2009 was so bad. And in fact, there have even been cases after vaccination, but only in Europe. However, once you have narcolepsy, your cells are already destroyed, so it doesn't really matter whether or not you are vaccinated or not.
Really? It can't get worse?
No,
like if it's
because-
another, because I know it could be multiple environmental factors leading up to your
But most
development.
people, once you have cataplexy,
Yeah.
at least we know pretty much that 90% of your cells are gone.
Okay.
So really, it doesn't matter if you have, more that are destroyed. It's pretty much it's all gone.
Okay.
So I don't think there's any risk for people. And in fact, we were a little worried, and I've been watching, and I know a lot of people get this seasonal flu and they never get narcolepsy. It's worse. So I think, in my opinion, for people who already have narcolepsy, they shouldn't worry about the flu. They should get vaccinated, and
Okay.
especially they should get vaccinated if they are, pregnant, very young children. I mean, that's a little bit more complicated, but older, people, because I think the risk of the flu is way above the risk of, having an exacerbation of narcolepsy, which again I've never observed ever with the flu.
Okay.
Now there's a question of if, what do you do about your relatives? Their relatives have a little more chance of having narcolepsy, right? Because as I mentioned, there's a little more chance of having narcolepsy than in the general population. Do you get them? Did you get your children vaccinated? That's a tough one. Because maybe indeed, there's a little more chance that this would push people, even so it's not proven, to develop narcolepsy. Honestly, there's no evidence for it. The only vaccine that triggered narcolepsy was in Europe, and it was a very particular vaccine that probably was from GSK.
Yeah.
That probably was unusual because it was designed to be extremely strong.
Yeah.
So I think the seasonal vaccine are not very strong, and there's really no proof that say is going for the Radish. Yeah. I
Last.
told
You went for the radish last.
Yeah.
You went for the good stuff first.
That's true. So I think in general.
But what about, how are we going to know if another flu epidemic is going to possibly bring a big onset?
So that's where I'm personally very frustrated because, we actually I went to a meeting in Belgium where there were about 200 people, and they were all government employees and, people from the CDC, the NIAID, like from all the institutions that are very worried about the flu. Because it's true, we don't know. Maybe there could be a catastrophe for flu that will cause a lot more cases. It's possible. Or a new vaccine that could create a lot more cases. It's totally possible. And we are working on this. Everyone knows that's important, but the grant we send, we don't get them funded. So there's more people that have enough money to visit, to listen to the Congress, and to fund the research. Actually, there's many more people who are going to the Congress than people who are actually studying the problem.
The problem is
so that's a little bit of frustration, but we need to study this. I think that's very important because I think it's very clear that vaccines are the most safe, the safest and most effective way of preventing a lot of diseases.
Right.
And like everything, it's not ever perfect. I like to say there's nothing that's a free lunch. If you take a medication, if you take tomorrow an antibiotics, do you know that maybe you can become deaf? I mean, that happens every year.
It's
in
not
the
black
US.
and white. I think we always think these issues are like vaccines are good or bad, and it's not black and white.
Yes,
it's just more complex.
Tremendously safe and good, but of course it would be crazy to think that they never ever cause a problem, because that's just not the way the organism works.
Yeah.
Again, if you give an antibiotics, even a safe antibiotics, people get deaf sometimes, or their kidney gets killed because there is a weird side effect of vaccine. Only 1 out of 100,000 people, but it does happen, and that's not unlike what happened with vaccine, etc. But we need to learn where this happens to prevent it.
Right.
That's all. That's very simple, and then that's the research, and and also I think it's a very interesting area of research because we are discovering more and more that I think narcolepsy, understanding better narcolepsy in the immune system, would help to understand a lot of other autoimmune disease and a lot of other problems that involve the immune system. Now we are realizing a lot of brain disorders, maybe even depression, could sometimes be due to immune problems.
Wow.
So there's Alzheimer. So I think it's also a gateway to understand a lot more than just narcolepsy.
Right.
And often discoveries are not made by pooling money into one area, but also by studying other little things and letting serendipity work.
Yeah.
That's my
Well,
thinking.
we have a lot more research to do,
I know.
and it needs to be funded. So we got to get advocates out there, making sure that Congress knows this is important for us to make these changes and advancements.
It's also in general, it's one of the most exciting time now we have all the tools to study narcolepsy, but also all kind of other diseases.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. I mean, when I started to do research, it was so boring. We had one idea, it took months to do it.
Yeah.
Now you have one idea, you can do it very rapidly, you can study thousands of genes at once. I mean, we are the golden age of biology and medicine right now, where an investment in all kind of diseases can make a huge difference. So yes, I think that's actually a huge mistake of our government in general not to invest more in research, because we could sell what we find to China, to all kind of other places in the world. It should be a very profitable place to invest based on where we are scientifically. That's just my opinion, but that's bigger than
Yes, no, I agree. That's awesome. Well, I want to thank Dr. Mignot and Watson for joining us for our first Facebook Live event. I'm sorry that we did not get to everyone's questions. We had way more questions than we could possibly answer today, but I hope that this was fun and educational. I know that I am always energized talking to you, and I always feel like, there's just so much to do and a lot more work to get done and to go back and to do that work. So
yes.
And I want to just make a note to thank everyone that came and listened. And whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording, this will be recorded, so you can share it with your friends and family afterwards to make sure that they hear all the latest. And one special announcement that today is the US launch of the new book Sleepyhead by our friend
great.
Henry Nichols, who I know that you're featured a lot in this book, and it's a really awesome read about neuroscience and sleep
In general, yes.
and narcolepsy as well, and his experience with narcolepsy as a person with narcolepsy in the UK. So that book has been out since March in the UK, but today is actually the US
I
launch.
didn't know.
Yes.
Because I've read it already, and it's an excellent book.
Yes, it's an excellent book. So we put up a review on Project Sleep's website, and there's a link there to make sure that you can purchase it and share that too, because all those types of resources will help educate people about sleep and about narcolepsy. And last but not least, I want to just announce that our October Facebook Live event for Project Sleep will take place in Australia. We're going to do it on the Sunday after the big narcolepsy conference. So in Australia, it'll be Sunday morning at 11 a.m. in Sydney, but for the US, it'll actually take place Saturday at 9 p.m. On October 13th. So mark your calendars for October 13th, the Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be the next Facebook Live for Project Sleep. And thank you guys again for tuning in. It is amazing to be here with you, and we will see you again soon. Bye.
Thank you so much.